What up, friends? Thanks for coming back to Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk about complicated things and improve over time, just like wine does. This week, I'm excited to have one of my new friends, Nick, and we'll get more about how we met and his story. But of course, we have to talk about this week's wine. And I would like to say that Nick and I coordinated that we both had rosés, but it just ended up being like the perfect little accident. So
Crazy perfect little accident. Yeah, somehow ended up coordinating rosés together. But it's summer, so it's
summer.
appropriate.
Yeah, it's pretty warm over here in California. Nick's in Colorado currently, so the rosé I think is a good choice for this week. But right, I'll read the wine bio and the winemaker's bio, and then we'll get into it. So this wine is by Karen Birmingham from Lodi, is Sangiovese or Sangiovese, however you pronounce that, and it's a rosé 2020. They describe it as bright and juicy like freshly plucked wild strawberry or even a watermelon Jolly Rancher. This mouthwatering rosé is an instant refresher. Italian variables like make fabulous rosé. Karen says that this is pink and a Sangiovese, and the climate in Lodi is perfect for growing this variety. When the grapes were finally ready to harvest, she crafted this perfect, easy sipping rosé for the warmer days ahead. So perfect for today. Now, so Karen is she showcase. I'm not drunk yet, I swear. This is going to be interesting. She showcases the great wines of Lodi and Clarksburg. She likes to make fruit-forward, friendly wines that are easy to drink and enjoyable. Wines that are elegant and balanced that can be enjoyed at multiple occasions while relaxing, hanging out with friends, and with a meal. As a student at Washington State University, she jumped at the opportunity to be a research assistant in the lab of Dr. Charles Edwards in the Department of Food and Science, who was working with the Washington wine industry. She completed her BS in microbiology and an MS in food science, focusing on wine fermentations. Wine became a passion for her during this time. She's originally from Sacramento, moved back to California after graduation when offered a great job as a well-known food research laboratory. She spent her weekends visiting wineries, having group tastings with friends, and thinking about making wine. And she pursued her passion and moved to Lodi. So if those who are not familiar with Lodi, it's a small town in Northern California, and there's like 80 wineries in that small town. It's insane, and they're really good. So if you're ever going to a place for wine tasting, go to Lodi. But anyways, cheers, Nick.
Cheers, cheers. I had not known that about Lodi, so good to know.
Mm-hmm. How's yours?
And perfect for a summer day.
Perfect for summer day.
So,
I
yeah.
would concur. Hers is definitely sweet.
Yeah, no, this is a little more bitter, I would say, than some other rosés. It's definitely not as sweet as I'm drinking. What is this? Whispering Angel. I literally have no idea. It was just in the fridge. So, yeah, definitely a good rosé, but a little bit, honestly, a bit bitter for my taste. But yeah, so good though. Yeah.
Whispering Angel. I like when you go to wine tasting, like wineries or just wine bottles, the names in general, that they're super romanticized, and I think it's entertaining to read them sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like rosés especially too are kind of very much so in that realm. But yeah, I mean, I drink rosé, but I kind of drink all wines. My dad's a huge wine guy. Like he has boxes and boxes of wine. So he always is, dinners and everything else. He'll open a bottle for us family and we'll share it. And so I've gotten my fair share of tastes and definitely have acquired the taste for it over the years, whether I liked it or not. So
yeah, I think with wine, you really have to learn to acquire it at first.
oh yeah, definitely. It's not, no,
Mm-mm.
that's not a thing you're stealing from your parents' basement at 16. So
No.
it's
No.
usually beers or maybe your liquor, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to finally have you on the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'll let you introduce yourself. That way I don't jinx or mess up that part for you.
No, all good. Yeah. So My name is Gockel. I'm originally from New Jersey. Went to USC, and the way that this entirely came about was I had your dad as a business communications professor while I was at USC, and when I say that he literally changed not only my education but my perspective on life, it's no minced words there. He really opened up my perspective not only on just careers and work and how to think about those things and really understanding what you want to pursue, but life generally. I mean, the time when I had his class, it was a really, really weird time at USC because there was a weird that semester, I think literally like 8 or 10 kids unfortunately committed suicide that semester. And it was just a really, really weird time between that and some scandals at USC and this and that, whatever. And the lessons that he taught me about resiliency, seeing things through, um, yeah, sorry if that came up, but seeing things through, um, all of that really was just incredibly, incredibly transformative in my entire life and growth experience beyond the classroom. So I look at him in incredibly high regard, and you are obviously the apple does not fall from the tree in the short conversations that we've had. I can automatically tell that he's instilled a lot of those great values in you. And that's always so great to hear. Um, he's just been absolutely awesome and incredibly transformative in my life perspective. And I owe him a lot, definitely, in just formulating who I've become today, for sure.
That's so
So,
sweet. I'm gonna
yeah.
share this with my dad. He's gonna be like, oh.
It's true. I mean, I told you right before this, I'm not someone to mince words. I am very transparent. I'm very, just direct and straightforward. I don't like, beating around the bush or playing games or this and that, whatever, and all this other type of stuff. And, when I say something about something, I genuinely truly mean it and embody it and feel that. So it's really incredibly true that he really transformed and changed my growth trajectory as just a human being and allowing me to find context and understanding of where I fit kind of into this world and everything else. And also just teaching me faith too as well. Cause there's, you're in college, junior year, everyone's getting internships and all these people have these internships locked up and this and that. And I still have no idea what I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. And just his guidance and availability was a godsend, really. It was a gift, honestly. And I'm fortunate that he was able to come into my life.
Mm, that, that makes me happy to hear because my dad always loves talking about his students, and I always know how passionate he is about teaching. So for me, it's really awesome to hear when he's able to form really great connections with former students like you. And I'm really glad that he was able to connect us too.
Right. Yeah. And it's been fantastic. I mean, he yeah, like he was just we talked about it when I went back for USC graduation, of course, and fortunately your dad was around to grab dinner. We had a 4 hour conversation, which is amazing. And we talked about that, how there's the amount of just first off, can I curse?
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
All right. So the
You're
amount
free
of
to go.
shit that just like teachers have to deal with on a daily basis between the one side of the spectrum where it's like, I didn't get a half point on this quiz and I need an A and I can't live without the fact if I don't have an A, you need to give me an A, to the other spectrum of, oh, wait, we had a project due. Wait, I wasn't even realizing we were in a group project and you have to deal with all of that and everything else and all that type of stuff. And his entire mentality is if I can just really truly impact one person in a class, that really keeps me motivated and keeps me going. And, I definitely want to make it known to him too that he really did have that impact on me significantly. And just that it's worth it. And, just showing him that gratitude and that gift of having his blessing in my life. So,
Yeah, no, I know for sure that he's happy to have now a really good relationship with you. And anytime you're in California, you're more than welcome to come over for dinner.
I have to take him up on that for
Yeah.
sure. Definitely. Cause I've heard your brother is a fantastic cook.
Oh
So
yeah, he loves to cook.
awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah. I will
Yeah.
definitely take you guys up on that.
All right. Well, let's dive in. So when your dad, my dad, when he connected us and then we talked on the phone before, you shared a bit about your story with dealing with depression, anxiety, and how the things you've learned from that and where you're at now. So I'll let you have the floor and share as
Sure.
much as you want.
Yeah. I won't try and blurb on for too long about it, but um yeah, I mean it started like the one thing I will say is that I mean I'm really fortunate for the situation that I was brought up in. Like I pretty much had everything realistically as a kid. I grew up in a stable household. My dad had a really, really, solid job, and realistically, money wasn't that big of an issue growing up. I grew up in a neighborhood of 13 houses, and six of those houses had kids that were in my age. And I grew up in a neighborhood where there was eight kids that were 3 years apart, all boys. So we had teams for everything, whether it was basketball at my place or baseball at the Finn's yard or this and that or whatever. So I had pretty much as idyllic of a childhood as you could, grow up. And I really didn't have that many worries at all. I grew up with an incredibly awesome friend group that I'm still considered my closest friends to this day. Just the guys that I made friendships with, guys and girls, throughout the years in middle school, in grade school and middle school. And then I really looked at my brother too in high regard during that time, and still do, definitely to this day. And he transferred to a private school, private prep college for high school. Um, and so I, wanted to get into that and follow him through that and do that. And at the time in middle school, I had a really good friend group. It was really, really solid. And, I felt really just appreciated by a lot of other people. And then I thought this was going to be a great thing for me. And I'm going to get really prepared for college. And I'm going to get, so many great things that come from that and this and that and whatever. And I was going into it with a really, really just great and high expectation that everything was going to be rainbows and sunshine. And it was going to be all great and everything else. And um, some of the problems definitely started then. Freshman year of high school, I started running. I ran cross country in middle school, so I kept on doing that. And the guys were cool, but weren't really my type. And was still trying to find some other people there. That there were a couple of kids from my middle school that went there. But they were all part of like different friend groups that I didn't really like, and was having a really tough time finding kind of my place in that. And and then that, and then also prep high school is a little bit more intense, and so some of the stuff is more intense, tests, essays, etc. Is a lot to deal with at times, and part of my anxiety was coming out through that, and then also not really having a support system, a group of people around me, where I was looking around me and everyone was getting off great with friends and doing well in school and being involved in sports and doing this and that and all these sorts of great amazing things, and I was just really struggling to find my place in that. And that just kind of continued and continued, and I wasn't really sure who to go about with that. um, I mean, I was even fortunate that my older brother was there too my senior year when I was a freshman, so we went to school together and everything else. But it still bothered me that I was looking around and everybody else was like finding their group, and I felt really just alone at the time. And that kept on manifesting and turning into just getting a sandwich at the cafeteria and then walking to the library because I didn't feel comfortable sitting next to other kids, and I didn't really feel like I was connecting with them in any sort of way. And just continually doing that, where I'm eating lunch alone in the library, and my friends from middle school are all having a great time with their friend groups and just growing those relationships even more. And I'd broken off from that as a conscious choice of mine to go to this school, and it just kept on growing and growing. And more the pressure of, okay, this is high school and these grades matter and college is a big thing and this and that. And the biggest thing for me is that I wasn't sharing it. And that's definitely one thing, I'm sure you can attest to this too, is that at least for me, in therapy throughout all the years, is that you take stuff inside your mind and you let a thought seed itself and plant itself in there, and you don't let it out and tell people. It's like shaking up a soda can. It just gets more pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure, and then eventually, it explodes. And it was just building, and it just built and built, and slowly over time, just the diet of words that I was feeding myself wasn't good. It's like, oh, like I'm not in any friends group. Like all these guys are going out and, they're having certain parties at homes and I'm not a part of that. And I don't really feel comfortable with these guys. And it turned into me as who I was because it was a self-examination of, me because I was doing great in middle school and doing fine. And then all of a sudden I come to high school and I'm eating lunch alone and I'm not connecting with anybody and I feel like I don't really have any place. And it's like, oh, like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're not good enough. You're not as good as these other kids. It's not as easy for you. You're not as smart as them. You're not as social as them. You're not athletic as them, and then just it builds and builds and builds. And, if you want to talk about it, I'm sure you can talk about the fact of just letting those thoughts and fetters kind of seed themselves inside your mind.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I really relate to the like ruminating and just having that spiral of negative thoughts and then end up believing them.
Right.
M- with me at school, it was kind of the opposite. I was the kid that sat by herself in like elementary, middle school because I didn't have anyone to play with, or I was also one of the very few only brown girls. So looking back now, I think that had like part of it to go through related to that. But also, I think my family situation at home, we briefly talked about it, but my mom was at home, but she was very unhealthy. And so that caused a lot of those internal conversations with myself of I'm not worthy, I'm a burden, no one approves of me, I'm not lovable, and all that stuff. And so I think that really carried on to me. Even as an adult now, I still have those thoughts just because it's familiar and
Hmm.
it's like it's habit. Like you just end up always going to those same thoughts because you've built that habit and that familiar place of I'm just gonna put myself down or I'm gonna talk shit to
Right.
myself.
Right.
And
There's a weird comfort to it too when
yeah.
you're in it, which is very, very weird unless you experience it yourself. You think, oh, how the fuck is telling yourself you're a piece of shit comfortable? But it's like, no, it's the familiarity and the okay, I'm not comfortable in the outside world. So even though these are really negative thoughts, it rings true to me and that's what makes it feel I think a little bit more comfortable than what it might be or whatever. But um yeah, and that just kept for me it kept spiraling and spiraling and it started to get pretty bad come around the winter and the springtime. I stopped exercising pretty like well, I tried trying out for the basketball team, didn't make it. And the winter and spring, and I played lacrosse in middle school, but my high school's lacrosse team is like state champions every year. So I'm like, okay, I'm not just gonna go out and try out and not, do it again. So it's in a very lost kind of place, not having any friend groups, not having any sports or anything really to anchor myself to and feeling like I was doing terrible in school. And I vividly remember in school thinking that if I got a 3 out of 5 on a quiz instead of a 5 out of 5, that I would be homeless. Like the crazy anxiety of, okay, if I get a 3 out of 5 on a quiz, that means I'm going to get a B in this class, which means I'm not going to have my GPA be this thing, which means I'm not going to get into a great college, which means I'm going to end up working a shitty job, which ends up means that I'm going to, and like to extrapolate beyond that and to get so deep and insulated and just the blinders of that is just a really scary feeling for sure. And it then manifests itself in just me hurting myself and regularly listening to this one playlist that I still have to this day that like I don't fortunately really listen to it at all anymore. I haven't really listened to it, but it just really gave me kind of that weird comfort of wallowing really and just sitting in my bed and constantly going through those thoughts of oh you're not worthy, people aren't worthy of your energy, their energy isn't worthy of you, you're not worthy of anything else, you're not worthy of existing, you're not worthy of, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not fast enough, you're not like all of that things. And I started cutting myself a little bit. I mean, I vividly remember I had airsoft gun sometimes and I would put it to my head and shoot myself in the head with an airsoft gun, and like really deep type of stuff. And the worst part of it was I was on vacation one time and I was just really sad about it. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm with family. All these people are going out and going to shows and doing this and doing that. And I was writing out a suicide note, completely frankly. And I was, cutting myself, writing a suicide note, and just randomly messaging people on Facebook telling them I was going to kill myself. And it really seemed like, because like you said, you get so, once you have those thoughts and seeds that get planted in your mind, you find that weird comfort from them and you keep on returning back to them. And the more you return back to them and the less that you don't share that with anybody, their roots just grow deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's so hard to see any other alternative beyond just ending it or something that your conscious self would never really want to do. Um, and yeah, it was just a really, really dark time. I got really, really fortunately lucky because there was one time where I sent a picture of my slit wrist to some of the people in middle school, and fortunately, one of the girls went to the counselor in high school who told the local police about it. And when we came back from spring break, the police showed up at my door. And the crazy thing too, it's crazy how much you can hide that from people, because I had really been going through that from, call it, November to March was probably the worst time for me.
Mhm.
My freshman year of high school during that. And my parents had no clue. My brother had no clue. None of my friends really had any of a close idea of what I was going through. And I felt just so alone in that experience, obviously perpetuated by my circumstances in high school. But I also didn't really find or know about anybody that was doing that. Because also remind you, this was 2013. So this
Mhm.
was 8 years ago. And you kind of forget how much mental health conversations have made an advancement in that time.
Yeah.
But back then, it was still like not public really to talk about it a lot very openly
Mhm.
or with other people, or have sessions about stress management and anxiety and all of that type of stuff. So I got incredibly fortunate in that way of the police showed up and went, my scars were fine, and, my injuries were nothing detrimental, and incredibly, incredibly lucky that the first therapist that I chose that day is still my therapist to this day. And we were able to form that. It wasn't an instantaneous thing. That's another big thing too, is that people trying to seek help, it's like dating. You're not going to find the right therapist the first time over the second time or the third time or the fourth time, but it's a matter of not giving up. I got incredibly, incredibly lucky. It's incredibly, incredibly rare that we just were able to build off it one time. And I think also part of it for me too was I knew that I knew deep down I was like, there's something wrong here. And I wanted to stay with it as much as I hated it and thought I didn't need it. And it shifted my mentality of, oh, I'm a weak person, from going to therapy to, no, this is actually a tool that makes me stronger
Mhm.
instead of something that makes me weak. And that's, I think, a big perception that has definitely been dismantled over the years, is that you're not seen as a weak individual for having these issues. And it's not any indication of who you are and your worth and anything else. You need to seek out help. You're not weak for seeking out therapy. It's a strength and a tool in your toolkit to actually make you more emotionally aware. And that's why, as crazy as it sounds, I'm incredibly grateful I went through that experience at that time. Because you might be like, wait, what? Like, you're grateful for that? But um, it started my emotional journey and development and getting to know myself better at 13. And I'm seeing now it's paid incredible dividends in being able to understand myself and putting in the work and understanding myself for the past 8 years. Whereas there's people who have a wife and a family and a mortgage and a job, and they're in a career that they hate, and they married somebody that was just out of convenience and whatever else it may, and then they go through that realization at 45 or 50 or 55. And the fact that I was able to go through that experience at 13 and stick with it and fortunately find that path out, it's been incredibly grateful. And like, I not only transformative into who I am as a human being today, but just really has propelled me in my emotional EQ and understanding who I am, what my triggers are, what gets me into those certain things, and actually being able to stop myself from, because it's not a thing of it goes away. It's not like, because mental health, you think health, okay, health, you go to the doctor, you get a prescription, and it's over in 6 weeks, and you're completely fine, and it's all over, and it's all good. No, like, I still have anxiety attacks. I still have panic attacks. I still have bouts where I feel like an absolute dumbass and I feel like I'm not worthy of just anybody's attention or time, or big imposter syndrome of why the hell am I in this position? I'm not even close to being the person that I'm listed on this job application or whatever. And it's not a thing of you figure it out and it's over. It's learning how to live with it and equip yourself with the tools to stop yourself and prevent yourself from really going down the rabbit hole.
I just want to say thank you for sharing all of that because everything you're saying, I just could relate to so much and was even more of like a reminder to me of everything I've been working on currently. And I know there's a lot of people that are listening that are getting a lot from what you just said. So,
I mean,
yeah.
it's definitely, I mean, for me too, like in high school, I wasn't or anything like that. Like I really, to be completely frank, I started to really feel comfortable with who I am and how my brain works. Probably not until like I got to USC, realistically. And that's 6 years, 5 years therapy down the line.
Mhm.
So even if, for the people out there listening, even if you're seeking it out and you're trying to figure out things and you're still feel like you're in a rut, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years removed from what you consider kind of to be your rock bottom, I guess, keep going with it. Because the thing is, it's the type I that's the one of the biggest things I've learned about growth too. It's not in the environment that we live in today. We think it's so instantaneous growth, and oh my god, things happen overnight and you're cured and you're fixed and you become popular, whatever it is. You just live in that environment where everything is so instantaneous. But it's not, true growth isn't like that at all. One of the greatest analogies that I think about is that um you're digging for gold or something like that, and you keep on hammering the rock, you hammer the rock, hammer the rock, hammer the rock, and you hammer the rock 1,000 times, you crack open the rock and there's gold. It's not that thousandth hit that caused the rock to break. It's the 999 before then that did.
Mhm.
And remembering that is very, very important in everybody's personal journey, to remember that it's a long game. It's not something that's overnight. It's not something that you take a pill or you take this or that and it's over and it's done. It's a forever process that the more you do it and the more you lean into it, the more that it pays dividends. So,
Oh, 100%. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective too, because, like we've talked about before, mental health is more common or more vocal within women, but you don't hear a lot about guys sharing their story. And I think jumping back to the self harming and hurting yourself, I went through that whole experience. I first started in like between sixth to seventh grade. My parents found out not soon after, and so was kind of given the slap on the hand, like don't do that. And so eighth grade, I kind of like repressed those emotions of how depressed I
right,
was and suicidal, honestly. And going into high school, that familiarity thing, that habit where it's really sad and it's sad, but it's just some weird comfort thing. And so high school, I struggled with that and finally was able to get better once my mom left. But kind of even now, like you mentioned, that mental health, like that doesn't go away. You're always going to have the struggles, the up and downs. Like I struggle with anxiety attacks too. So you think like you could have months of feeling really good, you're on top of it, like shit's getting done, and then all of a sudden a trigger happens and you just spiral down. And that was me this past winter, where just a trigger happened and just super depressed all of a sudden, and found a little razor and like realized, got that kind of super dissociated, didn't even realize what happened until after, and
Mm.
even had me more like stuck because realize, oh, I'm stuck in that trap now and I don't know how to get myself out. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to go to therapy, or finally go to therapy for the first time, and like you, was able to find a therapist that I really liked the first time. And just, yeah, again, want to just share the thank you for sharing your perspective, because growing up I would hear of other girls that had struggled with depression, self-harm and all that, but I never heard of guys. And so it just makes you realize it happens on both ends. There
Right.
isn't, yeah.
And the other thing too is that it's something that kind of pierces through everybody, you know. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I mentioned it from the top that I had everything as a kid. Like I never had to worry about, to be frank, money was never an issue. Like I knew I was going to go to college, come out of it without any loans. I grew up in a neighborhood where I was playing all the time with friends, and I had a fantastic group of friends growing up, and I had pretty much as idyllic of a situation as you could grow up in, and it still came around to me. And that it really pierces through everybody. And for whatever situations or whatever happens along the line, whatever traumatic events or circumstances that you run into, it doesn't, it's not, it really happens to everybody. It can happen to everybody. And I think one of the big things for guys is that we don't have a good capability of talking about emotions, to be completely frank. I mean, I still do outside of a mental health realm, but just like dating or whatever, this and that, and trying to, whatever, and that type of thing. And and the other thing too is that for guys, it's a masculinity complex of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I need to be the strong guy. And it makes sense from, because the other thing too that's really been enlightening is thinking about the vehicle of your body and where it's came from too, at least as far as just getting out of those things. So at least for me, one of the biggest things that I know is exercise is incredibly, incredibly important. And it's not for getting yoked and all this other fucking bullshit that comes along with it and any of that crap. No, it's like I just need to get fresh oxygen in my brain and get my heart rate up a little bit so I don't have to stare at a screen and I else besides the fact my body is distracted, and I come out of it feeling refreshed and everything else. So kind of going back to the point that I was saying earlier is that guys, it's a very masculinity complex of, oh, I'm a strong guy. And that's the thing about, if you look back in history, like guys kind of had to be the family protector, and they had to be the one that brings their family through. I mean, go back, like, hunter gatherer times and that type of shit. They had to fight off a lion or whatever else it may be, and like that, you don't realize it, but those kind of brain sequences in your mind are still there. You're the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle of generations, hundreds, if not thousands of generations before you. And those are still deep in your brain, your subconscious, that you don't even realize. But for guys, you have to show a bit of that masculine image of, oh no, I'm good. Yeah. And like, I'm fine. Like, no, don't worry about me. I'm okay. And to be so dismissive of those feelings and viewing it in a negative light as, oh, this is a weakness of mine, it's not conducive to, like we said earlier, which is discussion. It's inclinative towards repression. You're inclined to be like, oh, I'm good. No, I'm fine. I'm a strong guy. Like, we're good. No, yeah, we're chill. It's all good. I'm fine. And just to dismiss it like that, when even if you have that opportunity to talk about it with someone, you don't want to come off as weak or anything else in that way. And you have to be like, oh, I'll figure it out on my own. Like, I can figure this out. I'll figure it out on my own. And it's totally not the solution to dealing with it. It's finding the tools in your mind that make it work for you. And at least for me, I'm a huge advocate for therapy. At the very least, if you don't feel comfortable in that situation and context at time, at least have a group of two or three people, not even a group, just one or two people that you can talk to individually, where it's like, hey, I'm not really feeling good right now. Can I vent to you? You know, and that was one of the biggest things where my friend from USC that I'm so fortunate. So I started rowing crew my spring, and that's what I did all of high school because I just had no idea what to do. My dad suggested crew, and I'm like, I don't know, I guess, sure. Practice that first day, and I don't remember specifically how we were able to share that with each other, but we were going through pretty much the same thing. You know, doubting ourselves, feeling like suicidal and just pieces of shit, and feeling that we're not good enough, and feeling all the pressures of more modern life, and always feeling like you got to advance, you got to be doing things, you got to think about the next book, and you got to think about the next thing, and this and this and this and this, and the pace of that and everything else. And the weight off of my shoulders to realize that I wasn't alone at that time was incredible. And I tell my friends to this day, I'm like, you literally saved my life at that time. Because if I didn't find you and I didn't find somebody that I felt comfortable at my age that understand the circumstances that we were both growing up through, if I didn't find her at that time, I don't know if I realistically, even with therapy, would have gotten out of it. So being communicative in that aspect is so incredibly important. And for me, at least personally, that's why I knew later on, I'm like, okay, I know that if anybody's going through these type of things, I'm going to make sure I'm open and receptive and very open in talking about my experiences in a very raw manner, because I know how much of a gift that was to me at that time. And I know how much of a gift that can be to other people, like now or in the future or whenever it comes about. So, you know, when your dad told me about this, I was all about, I was like, yes, like, please, like whenever, like, I want to do this 100%, you know, no doubt about it. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I when I started the podcast, I've mentioned this in other episodes, but I'll mention it again. There's the whole imposter syndrome, and anxiety of I'm putting myself out there on the internet, I'm being really vulnerable. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, but will they? No. And I've fortunate enough have been able to receive feedback from people that have listened in and shared how much conversations are necessary and how it's opened the floor for them, and how they really appreciate people like you and me just being vulnerable enough to just lay all their shit on the table, and makes people realize you're not alone. Everyone has something they're dealing with. Everyone's
yes,
on some level kind of fucked up in the head. And it's okay. Like, it's not bad. Like you mentioned before, you're not weak for going to therapy or seeking help. There's something actually super empowering of knowing I
it's the
need more
exact
tools.
opposite of weak. It's the
Exactly.
exact opposite of weak. Being able
100%.
to come out and say that is one of the bravest things you could possibly do,
Oh,
realistically.
it takes so much courage to be self-aware and realize, I'm struggling. I need some help. I'm going to go seek the help I need and use that as a toolkit to make me stronger and more wise and more self aware of when I'm triggered or if I'm in a spiral, what to do. And it's really great that you were able to realize that at a young age. I think for me, there's certain parts of it I figured out throughout my life, and now I'm 24. In this past 6 months, I realized a lot more. Like, I have a lot of shit I still need to work on. So just been reading books, doing this podcast, just doing research and just reflection. And again, there's something super empowering about taking that shit, and then, like you said, it's not a label. You don't have to let that define you. Just
Not at all.
it can be like a tool or like a vessel of what you can overcome, and then how can
Empowerment.
you, yeah, and then how you can help others too.
100%. And it's like, you know, I mean, going back to the other thing of trying to put it down, you can keep kicking down the road, kicking the can down the road, and kicking the can down the road, and kicking the can down the road as much as you can, but you're not actually going through and it in that way. And it still is difficult. And like you said, it's really a never ending process. And I know for me, at least, there's still so much to learn that I still am going to go through a lot of really, really traumatic things in my life that I haven't experienced yet. Like, I know for one that I kind of think about kind of a bit is, fortunately, I've been very, very fortunate, knock on wood, that I haven't had anyone in my life that was close to me that's really passed away either. And I know that's something that a lot of people deal with a lot of times, and it's a huge traumatic experience that brings about a lot of grief in that way. And I know that's definitely going to rock my world for sure once someone I really care about is gone. But I think just having the because that's the thing that it teaches you too. It gives you that perspective of being able to go through and realizing, okay, like I'm dealing with stuff now. I know it's going to continue, but the more that I invest in figuring out who I am, seeking help through therapy, seeking help through these type of things, and figuring out tools that I can put into my toolbox that I can use, it just helps you so much more further to help you through those traumatic experiences going forward, which for sure, without a doubt. And I mean, between your dad and then I took a class at USC called The Science of Peak Performance, which really kind of amplified and really, really made me a lot more distant from my anxiety and depression. Um, that really just taught me a lot of tools that I still continually use this day. And it's actionable tools. It's not just mantras and slogans and phrases and all this other things. It's like, oh, this is great. And the thought's gone and I'm back to being depressed now. No, it's like actionable things that are proven through scientific research to make a difference in your brain. So that class was also incredibly, incredibly helpful for me.
Would you be willing to share those tools? Because
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
definitely. Um, yeah, where do I start? There's definitely a few. One that automatically comes to mind for me is, I didn't learn this through the class, but I actually read this book. It's called The Charisma Myth, which is a great book. Just recommend. It's a interesting read at the very least. Um, but it taught a thing of, whenever you're in a situation when it took it in the perspective of not feeling charismatic in that way, but it really can be applied to all these mental health issues, depression, anxiety, etc. Of, when you're feeling like yourself in those moments, take a second, take a second, close your eyes, take yourself out of your body, imagine what it looks like from an outside perspective looking at your body, and then put on a lab coat, get a clipboard, get a white pad, pretend like you're a scientist, and pretend like your job is to observe this subject in its state, and your goal is to figure out why it's in the state, right? So it takes you first, that by doing that, it takes yourself out of the experience, right? And for me, it's like, okay, well, okay, this person is really, really anxious right now. Why is that happening? Well, I'm trying to think of a particular example. Like, I'll go through one recently. I mean, I've been fortunate that we have a really good relationship with my bosses right now, but there's also times where for 3 months we didn't have like our regular one-on-one talks where we would just check in and see how things are going, this and that, whatever. And I just kept letting it build and build and build. And I was letting myself get into my head that I wasn't doing a good enough job. They were expecting more of me. There was a lot of side comments that were coming at it from me. I was really, really stressed with a lot of school, managing 18 units of work with also working a full-time job and trying to throw a festival as part of my classes at the same time, like all of that at the same time. And thinking that every single comment was made throughout the day was directed at me in some way, even if the conversation was about somebody completely different. And reiterating those thoughts, like you do a lot of times with depression, where you feel comfort in a weird way, just continually going back to those thoughts again and again and again and again, it led to me having an anxiety attack. And so when I'm in that scientific coat and looking at it from that, I'm like, okay, well, he's taking 18 units of credit. He's working, 25 hours a week at his job. He's trying to throw a festival right now. He hasn't communicated with his bosses recently about what's going on, about his performance, if they think he's on track, if they think he's succeeding, if they think he's failing, all of those different factors. And then you realize, like, oh wait, okay, there's a lot of these factors around me that are causing this, and it allows you to take yourself out of that experience of, okay, wait, this isn't just me in a manipulated version in my head that I believe is to be true. There's a bunch of other things in my environment that are happening around me that are leaning me into this feeling. Um, and so that's definitely one for me, that being able to psychoanalyze myself in the moment is incredibly huge. Um, that's one, definitely. Um, Gratitude journals and just journaling generally have been incredibly helpful. So there's been countless numbers of times where I'm just so in my head about something, and then I'm like, okay, I need to journal. And I bleh, just let it all out on the page. No judgment, no nothing. You can go in any direction you want. Just let your thoughts flow out of from here, out of there, onto the page. And by letting yourself do that, you lift the weight that's in your brain and you put it there. So it takes the weight that's here and you put it right there. And by just writing out your feelings and your emotions of it, well, there was this comment that was said today that I know it wasn't really directed at me, but I interpreted it in a really wrong way. And it's been really bothering me and nagging at me for the past few days. And, I know that it really wasn't. And then you allow yourself to almost work through it, because seeing the words on the page is a lot different than just the passing thoughts in your mind that are going by at a million miles an hour. So you can actually see it on the page. You see it, you reread it once or twice before you write the next sentence. And you're like, well, okay, well, this might have happened because of X, Y, and Z reason, and this actually isn't because of me, and whatever. And it allows you to almost work yourself out by just literally physically seeing it on a page and reading it. So that's definitely been helpful. Obviously, meditation is incredibly key for me, and I usually find that through running, at least personally. Again, getting back to your biological history of your physical body, hunter gatherers, we were meant to walk 10, 15, 20 miles a day. Like, we were constantly walking, we were constantly moving, we were constantly doing those type of things for thousands of years. I would venture to argue that probably over 50% of human sequences, from Homo sapiens to the start to where we are at right now today, people were walking all the time. They were running, they were outside, they were everything else. So definitely finding therapy through nature in that way has been incredibly helpful. It's just, okay, unplug from Zoom, unplug from Gmail, unplug from school, unplug from all that stuff. I'm just going to go outside, and I don't care about what time I do it in. I don't care if I need to walk for a mile, if I'm doing a 3 mile run or something like that. I don't care about any of the times. I'm not going for PRs. I'm not going for anything of that. I just need to spend 20 minutes outside with my heart rate a little bit elevated, and just outside and running and walking and whatever. And that's definitely been incredibly instrumental, especially working now, where you're staring at a screen from 8:30 to 6. And going back to our biological thing, we're not meant to be sedentary and sitting and staring at things and thinking about complex problems for 10 hours straight. So being able to unplug in that, and it doesn't have to be running. It can be throwing a frisbee, it can be playing basketball, it can be doing yoga, it can be doing Zumba classes, it can be playing tennis, it could be swimming, it could be anything. I mean, for me, my mom hasn't figured any exercise that she wanted. She hated exercising for 62 years. And then this past year found pickleball, and she loves it. She plays 3 hours a day now. And I can already tell she's definitely a lot more happier on those days where she's out playing pickleball and she has her group and everything else like that. And just there's no judgment in that. You know, I think we come from times in high school and college, and you have to make the team, you have to be this good, and all this other type of stuff. And it's about getting your body physically active and realizing that you're really nourishing the body in that way, and unplugging from the artificial environment that we live in between computers and phones and social media and all this other type of stuff. So those are definitely three that come to mind. There's a spoken word track that I listen to. It's one of my favorite bands or groups, Above and Beyond. They released a very melodic record called Flow State, and they put a section on that album that they got a yogi, Elena Brower, to speak on the tracks for 15 minutes. And the amount of times that I've gone from the verge of a panic attack to completely calm after 15 minutes from listening to that is incountable. Like, I go to that 3 times a week at least. Like, and it's not a thing of regimented thing or whatever. It's just I love it so much and it's so incredibly useful for me that I always keep on going back to it. So it's the biggest thing is just keeping on trying. You always hear the phrase 90, 90, or what is it? It's like 90% of life is about showing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing in mental health. 90% of it, 95% of it is just continuing the effort to find things and solutions that work for you. And even if you're a year, 2 years, 5 years, 8 years into it, you still haven't found anything, still knowing that there is a solution out there, you just haven't found it. And not giving up in that sense of, oh, I'm infixable. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, this is too deep of a problem for me. No, it's continuing the discovery of finding certain things that work for you, which is incredibly, incredibly important.
I loved all of that. The tools you mentioned, I'm definitely going to be trying the lab coat one, and the music, I'm definitely going to have to listen to that because
Yeah,
music
I
helps
will.
so much. Yes.
I will send that to you, and we can post it or whatever.
Perfect. Yep.
It,
We'll put,
it's helped innumerable amount of times.
hell yeah. We'll definitely put the links of everything, even the book too, in the description, whatever platform you're on. And wanted to jump back to something you said, but I got so distracted about the lab coat.
No, I think I was. Yeah, sorry, I was babbling
No,
on there for a bit.
no, that I've never heard of that before, and that's so interesting. But that sounds super helpful of just being able to
Right.
take yourself out of it and watch from an outside perspective of what are the facts and kind of helping yourself not get stuck on the thought
Well, it
train.
speaks to visualization too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an incredibly, incredibly powerful tool that a lot of people don't utilize enough as well, which is that like being able to really invest in it. And when you're going through that exercise, you close your eyes, everything else, don't just be like, oh, okay, lab coat on and what's going on. No. What what does it look like? Where are you laying right now? What would it look like from an outside perspective? If someone was filming you right now, what would it look like? What do you look like? Hair messed up and everything else, and you're having a terrible day, and you have, whatever on your side. You've been in bed since, noon or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, what does that look like? Is the sun there? What does it smell like? What does the temperature feel like? Really going in depth in those questions and getting that real, true image is just makes it enhance that much more, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like really getting in depth with it. And then the more that you actually question those things of what does this look like? What is this person wearing? What environment are they in? Are they hot? Are they cold? Are they this? Are they that? Whatever. Um, Help make that entire exercise that much more enhanced and useful for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and visualization too is always that's definitely another tool of, okay, instead of always going to what's the worst that's going to happen and oh my god, this worst situation is going to happen, I know it for a fact. Well, what if it doesn't? What's the best situation that could happen? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not a thing of setting expectations and expecting that best thing that's going to happen, because you're going to get let down a lot, to be
Yeah.
completely frank. Shit happens, people are shitty, all that type of stuff happens. But at the same time though too, that allowing yourself to be like, okay, well, I'm in this situation, this is the worst that could happen, but you know what? This positive thing could also really, really has a very good chance of happening. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I think, oh wow, like, I mean, I'm trying to think about a specific example I could put this into, but I, I'm struggling to find one. But just like visualizing that, and again, going in depth to those questions. What does that positive situation look like? Feel like? What's the temperature? What? How do you feel? What does it feel like standing there in that moment? What do you feel as far as the emotions around you? What would that emotion mean to, what would that event or thing or whatever it is, embody that and really dig deep into those questions of questioning the entire situation, because then it makes it that more encapsulating and involving as far as the visualization aspect piece of it goes. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely helped. All of those have helped me incredibly, incredibly. And the other thing too, I mean, going back to at least the gratitude on the class, this is scientifically proven stuff to work. And that was a really big eye-opening thing for me, was that Glenn is an incredible teacher. I encourage everybody to listen to Glenn Fox's podcast that he's hosted on anything else. He can talk about it at an incredibly more sophisticated and masterful level than I can. But um, being able, it literally, there's hordes of scientific studies that show that if you try to maintain an optimistic and grateful mindset and having positive visualization and all those things, it helps just it helps significantly through a statistical scientific environment, through research. It's proven to help in those ways.
Those are super cool. Another tool, because you've been talking about visualization. Some My dad's gonna kill me for all these ums. uh, but
I got berated that first day of class. Don't worry. I
yeah,
had like probably about 25 in the first 5 minutes
yeah.
of my introduction when I was just talking about myself. So,
Once I have the wine, I'm just there's so many thoughts going on, and I'm like, wait, hold on, let me backtrack a little bit. Side note, my dad teaches communications and he's a stickler for filler words, so if I say he'll kill me. But anyway, one tool that my therapist taught me is the five senses, and that helps a lot with anxiety attacks and helping you ground yourself. And it's all about visualization, where you start with like, what are five things you see? What are four things you can feel? What are three that you can smell? Two that you can hear? One you can taste? Something like that. And just being able to kind of step outside of your thoughts and the stress that your body's going under, and visualizing everything, really being in the moment, mindfulness, and then being able to have that out of body perspective, like we've talked about, is super helpful. So I wanted to add that with the toolkit that we're
it
having.
takes you, because anxiety, I feel like a lot of times is a lot worrying about the future, right?
Mhm.
It's worrying about this test or this job interview or this date or this, that, or whatever else is coming up in the future. And oh my God, this thing, oh my God, I'm not prepared. I don't know what to do. You get that shoulder feeling where your shoulders are up here. And I'm not kidding. The first therapy session, my therapist got up from his chair and he was like, just calm
Wow.
down, just calm down. Just through talking everything. My shoulders were up to here, and I was like, yeah, and this and that and everything else. And I was like, it got up from his chair and lowered it down. But that present moment type of thing is definitely crucial because it gets you out of that forward looking, oh my God, I'm thinking about this thing, 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 and I can't think about anything else but this thing, to, oh wait, okay, so I'm here, this is what I'm looking at, I'm looking at that, this is what it smells like, this is how, whatever. It takes you out of that and brings you here and brings you present. And the other thing was, oh, there was one other thing I just had on the tip of my tongue. I forget. I'm sorry, but
You're good. You're
yeah,
good.
it just takes you out and brings you back to present for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on? Anything you want to share to listeners?
I mean, I think the last thing I guess I would say is just the greater perspective, and this reminds me of what I was going to say, which is that as cheesy as it sounds, and we talk about it all the time, it's like counting your blessings also helps incredibly, and really realizing like how much of a worse situation you could potentially have it off right.
That part.
So incredibly crucial. I mean, it's, you going all through these things and everything else. Just, I mean, you could do it if you want for, okay, well, I wasn't, I'm not trying to be racist or anything else like that, or any of these type of things, but I could have been born in a third world country and be food insecure and not knowing where my next meal was going to come from, or I could have, whatever it may be. You can, if you just go through the mental exercise of counting not only your blessing but also looking at what the alternatives could be, then that shifts the lens and perspective at which you look at things in. And counting your blessings too, as simple as I'm alive too. I mean, I've been fortunate that I haven't had anyone really close to me die, but I mean, in my high school, we were a class of 116 kids. So everybody knew everybody. It wasn't like we were all up in each other's business necessarily, but everybody knew everybody. And one of the guys that I went to high school with, he unfortunately developed cancer and passed away his sophomore year of college. And that was July of 2018. And we're in June of 2021 now. And the amount of times that I go back and think about just everything that I've experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly, the shitty, the terrible, all of that stuff, I always ask myself the question, what would Timmy do to experience that? What
Mm,
would Timmy do to experience this shitty 5 mile run in the middle of snow where it's snowing and it's 30 degrees and it's 20-mile-an-hour winds and I have a bunch of fucking work to do that I need to get back to and I'm staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning doing it? What would he do to experience that? And giving yourself that perspective twist is so incredibly crucial. I use it a lot with time, just general perception of things. Because so many people think, oh my God, I have to figure this out and I have to have a 6-figure job coming out of college and I need to be established and this and that and all this other type of shit. It's like you don't realize you have your entire life twice over to figure shit out.
yeah.
Twice. Like think back to when you were 6, right? What like what were you thinking about when you were 6 and all that type of stuff? It was Legos and going to the pool or whatever it may be, right? And that type of thing, right? And we're 23, 24 now, right? So it's been 18 years, call it, since then.
Hmm.
You have 40 years, 45 years to work and figure out life and figure out your stuff. And think about how much change you've went through from 6 to 23. And that's only half of the amount of time that you have in front of you to figure stuff out. You have twice that amount of time over. So as bleak as certain situations may seem and everything else, being able to reshift your perspective is also just been incredibly, incredibly helpful for me as well. So
I think that's super important. There's something about changing that perspective instead of dwelling in everything that's going wrong. Think about all the things that are going right, like having a journal, doing gratitude, saying things you're grateful for every day, especially when you're in a rut and don't you can't see the light of the end of the tunnel. Think about little things. Thankful that I'm breathing, thankful that I had dinner, thankful that I was able to talk to someone today. That's also
I start off every single one of my journals with "It's a beautiful day to be alive."
I love that. That's
It's true.
that mental perspective is so powerful. There's a post I've seen on Instagram here and there, and it says, "You've survived every single one of your worst days." And that really like sat with me because I think about all the days where I was really close to making a life-changing decision that would not have me here today, or all the days where you hurt yourself, or all the days I wish I just wanted to be dead. And I think now, like, exactly all this years of how much has changed in even the past 6 months for me, and having that courage and that resiliency to know things might be really shitty now, but it's not always going to be that way. And
No,
just to keep going and just see it through, stick it out. And when you're 40 years plus, you can see back and you realize that perspective of time is so short compared to all the potentially really awesome things you can do in your life.
exactly. One
Mm-hmm.
thousand percent. 1000% agree.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for sitting down and sharing this time with me. We're definitely going to have to do more episodes in the future.
Of course. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
always willing to come back on and talk more about this type of things. I mean, you heard me babble for a good, half of the episode at least. I definitely, everything else. I love talking about these things. And, like I said too, I made a promise to myself that, whenever I was given the opportunity to share my experience, that I would, because you never know. Even if you talk to 100 people in the room and 99 people just are deaf ears and don't give a shit and they're looking at their phones, there might be one person in that room that resonates with that and they realize, oh, wait, like I'm not alone in this experience. I actually empathize with those feelings, and being able to give, at least just share my story, and hopefully make people's day a little bit better in that way, or just change their perspective, is really amazing. It really is amazing. So I'm more than well. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity, and
Oh, of
really appreciate
course.
you bringing me on. So it's been awesome.
No, thank you. I just want to share to the listeners. Some people have reached out and shared their stories, and I'm so internally grateful for everyone that's trusted this platform and me and the space to be vulnerable. But to anyone else that's listening, feel free to respond to this podcast or to me on my Instagram or email and share your story. If anyone wants to be on the podcast to share their perspective story, this is an open platform. And I'm so thankful for everybody that's been courageous enough to speak about their truth and their journey with mental health. So just
Same goes
want,
for me too.
yeah.
My Instagram handle is Nick Gockel. If you ever want to reach out, always willing to talk. So
I'll put our handles in the description wherever you're listening, and feel free to message either of us. We're very open to being an open ear to you. So just want to say cheers.
wish I had more, but finish it out.
I
So
know. It's always so hard because I want to finish this hat like 10 minutes in. I'm like, I don't want the awkward, like, glug, glug, glug on the
yeah,
audio.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So there'll be more to drink tonight, though.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. One last thing to share with the listeners. This is actually the last bottle from the Female Winemakers pack that I have. So 12 episodes. It's kind of crazy to say. So if you tune in next week and future, we'll have a different pack of different themes. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you again. It was so good to have you on.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode.